Picture the air war of World War II, and you'll likely imagine Spitfires over Britain or B-17s over Germany. But the largest, bloodiest aerial conflict in history happened on the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Air Force lost approximately 4,000 aircraft in the first days of Operation Barbarossa, then rose from those ashes to inflict over 33,000 aircraft losses on the Luftwaffe, the majority of Germany's total air losses in World War II. This is the story of the most dramatic military transformation in modern history, and how a different kind of air war crushed the Third Reich. June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa begins. Within hours, the Luftwaffe destroys hundreds of Soviet aircraft sitting on airfields, parked wing to wing like targets at a shooting gallery. Within days, approximately 4,000 Soviet aircraft are gone, the largest air force in the world, annihilated before most pilots could even reach their planes. On paper, the VVS was a giant, the world's largest air force. In reality, it was a house built on sand. Stalin's purges had gutted the officer corps of experienced commanders. The men who knew how to fight were dead or imprisoned. The men who remained were terrified to make decisions. Soviet pilots flew obsolete aircraft, including the I-15 biplane and I-16 monoplane, alongside newer models. Most lacked radios. Most lacked proper training. Most lacked even basic tactical doctrine. Criminal unpreparedness meant thousands of aircraft sat exposed on forward airfields, packed together with no camouflage, no dispersal, no defense. When the Luftwaffe came, they didn't face an air force. They faced a turkey shoot. The Luftwaffe's objectives were clear: annihilate the VVS early, provide close support to advancing panzers, and disrupt Soviet logistics. In June 1941, they succeeded beyond expectation. Pilot Vasily Emelianenko recalled the desperation of those first weeks. "We flew until there were no planes left, and then we waited for the next day's attack. I remember the smell of burning and the silence after a raid, broken only by the cries for help. Soviet airmen fought with whatever they had, for as long as they could. When ammunition ran out, some resorted to the Terran, deliberately ramming their aircraft into German planes or ground targets. Picture that choice. You're flying a burning aircraft. Your guns are empty. Below you, a German tank column advances toward your hometown. You have one weapon left: yourself. Pilot Nikolai Gastello became a posthumous hero of the Soviet Union for ramming his burning bomber into a German column. This wasn't a heroic tactic. It was an act of desperation, revealing both the inadequacy of Soviet equipment and the grim determination of men who knew they were losing. The VVS was broken. The Luftwaffe ruled the skies. The German army was racing toward Moscow. The Soviet Union faced not just defeat, but annihilation. Yet within months, something extraordinary would begin: the greatest industrial mobilization in history, and the forging of a completely different kind of air force. Imagine moving an entire industrial economy 1,000 miles east, in the middle of a war, with the enemy at your doorstep. Between July 1941 and early 1942, the Soviet Union executed what would become the greatest logistical feat in military history. Approximately 1,500 major factories were dismantled, piece by piece, and loaded onto 1.5 million railway wagons. Aircraft plants, tank factories, steel mills, entire industrial complexes torn from their foundations and sent racing eastward to the Urals, Siberia, and Central Asia. 10 million workers and their families followed, crammed into trains as German artillery echoed behind them. What happened next defied belief. These factories didn't just survive the journey, they resumed production within weeks of arrival. Some began manufacturing aircraft parts while still in transit, welding components in railway cars as the trains rolled east. Workers slept beside their machines in unheated buildings through Siberian winters, working round-the-clock shifts in temperatures that froze metal tools to bare hands. One worker at an evacuated aircraft plant recalled, "We slept beside the machines. Every day meant more engines, more wings, more hope for the front. The numbers tell the story of resurrection. Aircraft production surged from 8,200 in 1940 to over 40,000 per year by 1944. At the heart of this industrial miracle was one aircraft that would come to define Soviet air power: the Ilyushin Il-2 Shturmovik. 36,183 units produced, the most produced military aircraft in history. The Germans called it Black Death. Soviet ground troops called it Flying Tank for its armored construction that could survive hits that would obliterate any other aircraft. Stalin had his own name for it, as essential to the Red Army as air and bread. This wasn't rhetoric. Stalin understood something fundamental that separated Soviet air doctrine from the West. The VVS wouldn't waste resources on high-altitude strategic bombing or attempting to flatten German cities. Instead, under General Alexander Novikov, appointed chief of the VVS in 1942, the Soviets were creating air power as flying artillery. Novikov faced a shattered force and rebuilt it through three principles: mass production, improved training, and centralized operational control. Every Il-2, every Yak fighter, every sortie had one purpose: destroy whatever stood before the Red Army. But producing aircraft was only half the battle. The Soviets weren't just rebuilding the VVS, they were reimagining what an air force should be. They were creating something the world had never seen: air power designed for one purpose only: to destroy whatever stood before the Red Army. While American and British bombers flew at 25,000 feet to flatten German cities, Soviet pilots flew at treetop level, hunting tanks and trenches. The VVS wasn't trying to win the war from the stratosphere. It was the Red Army's hammer, smashing whatever stood in front of the advancing troops. This wasn't strategic bombing. This was flying artillery. The Soviet air war was fundamentally different from Western campaigns. The VVS conducted no major strategic bombing campaign, no attempt to level Berlin from the clouds. Instead, Soviet doctrine integrated air power as direct battlefield support: massed formations of ground attack aircraft and fighters operating at altitudes where you could see the faces of the men you were killing. Their mission: destroy whatever stood before the Red Army. Tanks, trenches, artillery positions, supply columns, everything. The Il-2 Shturmovik embodied this philosophy perfectly. Heavily armored, this single-purpose ground attack aircraft could survive hits that would obliterate anything else in the sky. Stories circulated of Il-2s returning to base with dozens of bullet holes punched through their wings and fuselage, engines still running, pilots still alive. The armor worked. At low altitude, against concentrated German anti-aircraft fire, that armor was the difference between life and death. The turning point came at Kursk in July 1943. The reborn VVS, rebuilt from the ashes of 1941 with those factories relocated east, fought the Luftwaffe to a standstill. For the first time, Soviet fighters contested and won control of battlefield airspace. Yakovlev Yak fighters and Lavochkin La-5s provided essential escort for the Shturmoviks. By 1944-45, the La-7 was rivaling the latest German fighters in performance and lethality. Soviet pilots were no longer flying obsolete biplanes against superior opponents. They were flying modern fighters, and they were winning. Lend-Lease added another weapon to the arsenal: 4,719 P-39 Airacobras delivered from America. Soviet pilots loved the Airacobra for low-altitude combat, especially its devastating 37mm nose cannon. It produced many Soviet aces, including Ivan Kozhedub, who would become the leading Allied ace of World War II. But the core doctrine remained distinctly Soviet: not strategic bombing, not high-altitude precision strikes, massed tactical air support, flying artillery, air power designed for one purpose: annihilate whatever stands before the tanks. This doctrine required not just different aircraft, but different pilots, men and women willing to fly into the teeth of German flak at altitudes where a single hit meant death. The human cost would be staggering, but so would the heroism. The German soldiers called them Nachthexen, night witches. They flew obsolete biplanes made of wood and canvas, so flimsy that a single tracer bullet could set them ablaze. To avoid detection, they idled their engines and glided silently over German positions, the only sound the wind whistling through their wings. Then came the bombs. These were the women of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Regiment, and they terrified the Wehrmacht. Their aircraft was the Polikarpov Po-2, a training biplane never designed for combat. Wood frame, canvas skin, no radios, no parachutes, no armor. Maximum speed, barely faster than a car on a highway. They flew multiple sorties per night, sometimes 8-10 missions in darkness, dropping small bombs on German encampments, supply depots, troop concentrations. The psychological effect was devastating. One German commander wrote that the steady harassment made sleep impossible, that his men lived in constant dread of that distinctive whistling sound. Imagine lying in your tent, exhausted from battle, and hearing that wind-through canvas whisper growing closer in the darkness. Then the explosions. Then silence. Then, an hour later, they're back. But the night witches faced more than just German fire. They faced skepticism and discrimination within their own ranks. Female pilots like Lydia Litviak, the White Lily of Stalingrad, had to prove themselves again and again. Litviak scored 12 confirmed kills flying Yak fighters before she was killed in action in 1943. She was 21 years old. Her diary captured the weight she carried. "Sometimes I want to cry, but I must not. My friends are counting on me. Each victory, each return, is a miracle." Soviet male aces fought under conditions Western pilots could scarcely imagine. Ivan Kozhedub achieved the highest number of confirmed kills among Allied pilots, flying aircraft that were at best equivalent to, and often inferior to, the German fighters he faced. No comfortable rest bases, no rotation home after a tour, just relentless combat day after day until you died or the war ended. The human cost was staggering. The VVS lost approximately 106,400 aircraft total, with 46,100 lost in combat. 34,500 Soviet aircrew were killed. Ground crews improvised repairs under fire, working through sub-zero temperatures with inadequate tools and supplies. They watched pilots take off and counted how many returned. They slept beside their aircraft. They kept the VVS flying through sheer determination when logic said it was impossible. By 1944, these pilots, men and women, aces and ground attack crews, would have a weapon their 1941 predecessors could only dream of: overwhelming numerical superiority. The VVS was about to unleash a juggernaut that would crush the Luftwaffe through sheer, relentless mass. By the summer of 1944, the tables had completely turned. Where once the Luftwaffe ruled the skies, now Soviet aircraft swarmed in their thousands. Operation Bagration, the destruction of German Army Group Center, began with waves of Shturmoviks and fighters that outnumbered the Luftwaffe 10-1. The air war had become a relentless hammer, and the Germans could do nothing to stop it. The numbers tell the story of total dominance. The VVS flew up to 20,000 sorties per day during peak operations, a scale unmatched in any other theater of World War II. 20,000 sorties in a single day. Imagine the sky black with aircraft, the sound of engines a continuous roar from dawn to darkness. During Bagration alone, Soviet aircraft pulverized German defenses before tanks even moved, turning the Luftwaffe's own blitzkrieg doctrine against its creators. The same massed formations that had rebuilt from the ashes of 1941 now operated with overwhelming numerical superiority. In key sectors, Soviet aircraft outnumbered German planes by ratios of 10-1 or greater. The Luftwaffe, worn down by a two-front war, had become a shadow of its former self. By war's end, approximately 33,000 German combat aircraft had been lost on the Eastern Front alone, the majority of total Luftwaffe losses in World War II. Over 30,000 Luftwaffe aircrew were killed, missing, or captured in the East. Luftwaffe staff meeting transcripts from this period reveal growing pessimism about maintaining any semblance of air superiority. German intelligence had consistently underestimated VVS strength, fooled by Soviet Maskirovka, the deception operations that hid the true scale of Soviet air power through dummy airfields, radio traffic spoofing, and dispersal tactics that made counting Soviet aircraft nearly impossible. The Germans thought they were facing a recovering air force. They were facing a juggernaut. The transformation was staggering. The same air force that lost 4,000 aircraft in the opening days of Barbarossa now dominated the skies from Warsaw to Berlin. The industrial miracle that relocated 1,500 factories eastward had produced over 40,000 aircraft per year by 1944. The pilots trained in desperation after 1941 now flew with confidence, their Il-2s and Yak fighters sweeping German resistance from the battlefield. This was the largest, bloodiest air war in history, and it decided the fate of the Eastern Front. Yet it remains systematically underrepresented in Western narratives that privilege the Battle of Britain and strategic bombing campaigns. The Eastern Front Air War involved more aircraft, more sorties, and more casualties than the Battle of Britain or Allied strategic bombing combined. The VVS victory was won through industrial resilience, mass production, and ruthless tactical integration, not technological superiority. It was brutal, unglamorous, and utterly decisive, a relentless juggernaut that crushed the Luftwaffe through overwhelming force. From 4,000 aircraft destroyed in days to 20,000 sorties flown daily by 1945, the VVS resurrection remains unmatched in military history. This wasn't the glamorous air war of Western memory. It was brutal, unglamorous, and devastatingly effective. The Il-2 Shturmoviks flying at treetop level, the night witches gliding silently through darkness, the countless Soviet airmen who fought in this forgotten conflict. They didn't win through technological superiority or individual heroics. They won through industrial resilience, mass production, and the ruthless integration of air power as flying artillery. They proved that the Eastern Front Air War wasn't a sideshow. It was the main event that decided the fate of the Luftwaffe and the Third Reich. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.